Senator Paul said that that your vote was a bailout for Alaska at the expense of the rest of the country.
Oh my God.
That's what Senator Paul said.
My question was easy.
Senator, we've got the...
I didn't say it, ma'am. I'm just asking for your response.
My response is I have an obligation to the people of the state of Alaska. And I live up to that every single day. Do I like this bill? No, because I tried to take care of Alaska's interests. But I know that in many parts of the country, there are Americans that are not going to be advantaged by this bill. I don't like that. I don't like the fact that we moved through an artificial deadline, an artificial timeline to produce something, to meet a deadline, rather than to actually try to produce the best bill for the country.
That's Senator Lisa Murkowski, the deciding vote on Trump's budget bill in the Senate that allowed J.D. Vance to deliver the tie-breaking vote, talking about how she knows how harmful the legislation was that she just voted yes on. Murkowski's final decision to vote yes on a bill she has said multiple times is dangerous for millions of Americans pretty much encapsulates this bill's entire journey through Congress so far. Everyone, including Republicans, knows this bill will kick millions off their health care, transfer an ungodly amount of wealth to the top 1% on the backs of middle and working class, and risk food assistance for more than 5 million people. Maybe that's why Murkowski forgot how to use her face muscles. But Republicans have made it clear they don't care, and that their priority is staying in Trump's good graces. That's why they brushed off concerns about the Medicaid cuts with some of the craziest one-liners in the 119th Congress. Senator Joni Ernst said, "We're all going to die." Senator Mitch McConnell said, "They'll get over it." J.D. Vance said, "It's immaterial." And Senator Lindsey Graham said, "I feel great." Good to know you feel great, Lindsey, because with you guys in charge, we sure don't. Today, we're going to walk you through what happens next with Trump's big, ugly bill betrayal and what could happen if the House passes it and it heads to Trump's desk for signing. I'm Hannah Moldavan, Deputy Communications Director for the Democrats, and your host today. It's July 2nd, and this is the Democrats' Daily Blueprint. The Senate-passed version of the budget bill cleared its first hurdle in the House, the Rules Committee, overnight. Here's Rules Committee Ranking Member Jim McGovern calling out House Republicans for trying to jam this bill through Congress to meet Donald Trump's fake July 4th deadline.
And that's no accident. It's by design. It's the direct result of Republican leadership and the White House jamming this bill through Congress with zero transparency. Now, let's be totally honest. This entire process has been legislative malpractice. And let's not forget, this bill was jammed through the House in May so quickly that some Republicans said they would have opposed it if they'd known what was actually in it. And now, after another series of backroom negotiations in the Senate, we're getting jammed again, without any chance for the public, or independent experts for that matter, to fully review the bill.
Next, this bill heads to the House floor for debate and eventually for a final vote as soon as today. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this will be a cakewalk. Many House Republicans see the writing on the wall. They've heard from their constituents that they don't want this bill to become law because they don't want their lives ruined while the ultra-wealthy become wealthier. And at least a handful of House Republicans have expressed that they're not satisfied with this bill or have flat out said they won't vote yes on the Senate-passed bill. And remember that Republicans can only afford to lose 3 votes. Talk about Republicans in disarray. And let's not forget that even Speaker Mike Johnson knows how unpopular this bill is. Last week, he raised alarms that Senate Republicans' deep cuts to Medicaid could throw away Republican majority in the House. Even Majority Leader in the Senate, John Thune, admitted that Democrats have done a good job focusing on the harmful Medicaid cuts that this bill has. But this isn't over yet. As the Senate bill moves through the House, we need to keep the pressure on House Republicans who know how dangerous and unpopular this bill is. Let's listen to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries.
Why would anyone who claims to be concerned about protecting their constituents from these devastating Medicaid and health care cuts vote for Donald Trump's one big ugly bill. It's perplexing, and we're going to make this case strongly before the Rules Committee and on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Well, all of these deals are being made in the back rooms of Washington. The American people are paying the consequences. You've probably heard a lot about how this bill will kick $17 million off their healthcare and put SNAP benefits for more than 5 million people at risk. But this bill does even more than that. It will hike up energy costs and cut funding for important infrastructure projects, killing jobs for Americans across the country. The budget bill is the largest transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top in modern American history, hurting the poorest 40% of Americans while benefiting the richest. What's worse is that the people making little to no income will lose $560 because of Medicaid and SNAP cuts, while those making over $3 million will gain more than $118,000. Make it make sense. The bill also comes for our jobs. Millions of manufacturing and construction jobs are at risk because of Trump's attacks on clean energy projects. 7 states risk losing more than 100,000 jobs, including California, Georgia, Michigan, Tennessee, Illinois, South Carolina, and Arizona. Not to mention, as these energy jobs get shipped overseas to China, families will see their energy bill increase by hundreds of dollars. So as families pay more to keep the lights on, Trump's historic cuts to Medicaid and food assistance will stretch budgets even thinner. And as Americans try to get their health care and meals they need to survive, Trump is laughing. If attacks on Medicaid weren't enough, more than 300 rural hospitals are at risk of closing or cutting services, and at least 1 in 4 nursing homes will be forced to close their doors. Here's a nurse practitioner talking about these effects on the ground in West Virginia.
Half of all of the births in West Virginia are paid for by Medicaid, but that's an overwhelming amount of moms that would be affected, if we limit Medicaid reimbursement, potentially through these cuts limiting access. What I don't want to see happen is women choosing not to enter the hospital, period, just because they know that they won't be able to afford the bill at the end. I had a patient in family medicine who had Medicaid. She was on 70/30 insulin, which is one of the cheapest insulins out there, and she couldn't even afford that. And every month she would call me crying because she couldn't afford to pay for her insulin. It is heartbreaking when you have patients that just call you crying because they can't afford their medication. And then it's just this vicious cycle. It's those people I worry about.
Knowing the real world impacts of this bill are important. The number of people who will have their healthcare ripped away, the hospitals around the country that are at risk of closing. Senator Raphael Warnock makes a great point about what this budget says about Trump and Republicans' governance on a moral level.
We are in a moral moment because something else is on the line. I submit that the character of the country is on the line. In a real sense, the question tonight is, who are we? Not who do we tell ourselves we are, but who are we really? What and who do we care about? What kind of nation are we? And what kind of people do we want to be? Who matters? And who doesn't? Who do we think is dispensable? In no place is the answer to that question clearer than in a nation's budget. I submit that a budget is not just a fiscal document. A budget is a moral document. Show me your budget and I'll show you who you think matters and who doesn't. And if this awful budget were an EKG, it would suggest that our nation has a heart problem and is in need of moral surgery.
If it wasn't already clear enough, this bill stinks. And no amount of Trump fragrances is going to fix it. Those are real fragrances that Trump posted about on Truth Social earlier this week. By the way, as the Senate voted on taking healthcare away from 17 million people. Republicans ripping away healthcare while Trump hawks his latest grift. I'm not sure we could paint a better picture of how awful this bill is for working people and how it's all a boost for Donald Trump and his rich friends if we tried. So as we continue to put pressure on Republicans, you can help by calling your Republican member of Congress and telling your friends, family, neighbors, coworkers to do this too. Only four Republicans in the House need to vote on this bill to keep it from passing. So text call to 43367 to get their phone number and a script. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of the Daily Blueprint. We'll be here right with you at 10 a.m. every day on the DNC's YouTube page. Until tomorrow.